What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Fantasy Fridays. We are back here to give you our starts of the week for week 3 in NFL fantasy football. Happy to have my guy Manny back here once again. Happy to go through, the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends we're going to be looking at to start. So I'll go ahead and start out with my personal quarterback pick. I'm going to go with Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears. I know this is going to sound crazy to some people. I'm staying in the Flames. He has a great matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys. I expect a lot of points to be scored on both sides of the ball. I think that Caleb Williams, who has shown on tape, is going through the reads on a consistent basis to try and attack defenses, will get right here against Dallas. What about you? What's your quarterback at start of the week, Manny?
I'm actually going to stay in the same game. I'm going on with the QB on the other side, Dak Prescott. I think, he has a good matchup, especially with the Jalen Johnson out. And definitely, I think, this with these wide receivers, I think he's going to get going and get going early. And some stats will be padded.
All right, sounds good. What about your running back start of the week?
Running backs, I'm going to stay in the same game. I got two actually. I have one with Javante Williams. I think and also great matchup for the running backs as well. But he's also shown that he still has the juice. Being another year removed from his major injuries. I think the juice is still there. He's exactly what they needed. The yards after contact. Being able to grind out the tough yards and still being available in the pass game and being able to score touchdowns too. I think he's going to have a lot of scoring opportunities this season. You should have a couple this week too.
All right, sounds good. And look, I understand it. I think the Chicago Bears defense can be had on the ground, certainly. I'm going to take it to a different game. I'm going to go with Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. I like his matchup that he has. He's consistently been a part of a Saints, kind of offense that has actually, performed pretty well, I'll have to say. All things considered, it's tougher matchup on the road at Seattle. I think that will necessitate trying to feed him as far as those, receptions that we definitely love as far as PPR is concerned. I think that he'll get a lot of targets and be able to catch the ball out of the backfield, maybe take advantage of some of the weaknesses of the Seattle Seahawks defense, specifically on the second level. So, with that being said, we'll move on to my wide receiver start of the week. I am going back to the well. This guy has emerged as the number one wide receiver for his team, Rome Odunze. I love the matchup that he has against these Dallas Cowboys cornerbacks. Obviously, I think that Caleb Williams will be able to get him the ball. I think the Rome Caleb stack will be very fruitful for some teams and fantasy football this week upcoming. Manny, how you feel about your wide receiver start of the week?
I had a feeling that you would take one of my players eventually, and Dunze was he's on my list. But I don't have a bad backup option, and Scary Terry. I think the QB situation for this week is a little in doubt, but I think you can be confident starting Terry because in the starts that Mariota did have, he targeted Terry and he scored. So I think that's going to be the case here, especially against a vulnerable Raiders defense, going against one of his former teams at Mariota. That is, I think that the ball's going to be in the air early, and they're going to look to get Terry back on track, regardless of who's starting. So.
Absolutely. So, what about your tight end start of the week?
Tight end, I'm gonna go back to, I have like I think this is gonna be a good fantasy game. But Jake Ferguson, I think he's solidified himself as that even a second receiving threat. You might see him have more targets than Pickens. Some games I think these could be one of those games. Um, they gave him a major contract, so I think they're going to showcase him and they're going to make sure he's fed. Jake Ferguson, one of the most underrated tight ends this season for fantasy. Get on board.
Absolutely. I love that pick. And obviously, we love the Chicago Bears and Dallas Cowboys game. So, for some fantasy scoring, to say the least, I'm going to go here with my tight end start of the week. This is a guy that I think is ultimately going to start his breakout for the rest of the season. This week against the Indianapolis Colts, I've got Chigakonkwo. I think that you saw the first 2 weeks this Titans offense went against some tough matchups. Obviously, being able to go against Denver was not a great matchup to start out. And then the Rams last week were tough too. Now it eases up just a little bit. The Colts aren't as tough of matchups, in my opinion, for those defenses. I think Cam Ward has shown the ability to get the ball out on a consistent basis. Chigakonkwo has played 80% of the snaps, had 10 targets to start through the first 2 weeks. I think this is the game in which he gets in the end zone and begins that breakout for the rest of the season. So, with that being said, I appreciate you guys for coming by to Fantasy Football Fridays with Manny and me. Hope you guys have a great